Awesome. Well, so this morning we're continuing our review of How to Win Friends and Influence People. I wasn't sure how far people would have the chance to get. So I know, Vicky, you said you don't have a copy of it. But did you read the book at any time before?
I think I've read parts of it. I don't think I ever finished it, to be honest.
Okay. And how's everyone else going? Julie, where are you up to with it?
I haven't read any of it.
Okay, that's an honest answer.
I still haven't read the woman's one. I'm reading. It's a bit of a problem for me at the moment. I can't. I'm having difficulty with it. I almost need to have them audio, but
well, you can get them audio.
I fall asleep when I'm reading. That's the problem.
You can get them audio with
yeah. I like to read them out loud myself, actually, even if I'm on my own.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it because it does resonate a bit more. That's one of the things I've enjoyed about reviewing it online with people is we get to talk about it where it actually sinks in more, I think.
Yes, it does. Well, it's multi-sensory, you see.
That's right.
Actually, if you could walk around reading, it would even be better.
Could be dangerous, Julie.
Walking around reading with cooking smells and eating a mint.
Oh.
Then you're totally multi-sensory then.
Such innovation and creativity. Coralie, where are you up to? Are you with us still?
She just said that she just sent a message that she can't get the sound going.
Oh, okay.
Oh no.
Best thing to do there is to disconnect and reconnect. That will usually,
it happens, doesn't it?
That will usually fix it. Though not always. Karen, have you had a chance to read any of the book at all?
Yeah, I'm up to chapter 3 on tonight's segment. So I didn't finish for tonight's segment. So
okay. Well, so perhaps we might just do a quick review of what was covered, because this is the third session now. So the first section we covered was the preface and how and why it was written. And so part 1 was about fundamental techniques in handling people. And Carnegie said in that, let me just admit Christopher, who's just joining us. Good morning, Christopher. So looks a bit cold there in Sydney. Like you're rugged up. Okay, so in the first section, he was talking about the fact that dealing with people is probably the biggest problem you face, especially in business, but generally in life anyway. Our communication with people is so important. And in part 1, he was talking about the 3 principles, which were don't criticize, condemn, or complain was number 1. Number 2 was to give honest and sincere appreciation, not flattery. Number 3 was to arouse in the other person an eager want. And we were drawing a comparison with Think and Grow Rich, because that was written in 1938. This was written in 1936. So all the same contentious issues were in play back then. You know, people didn't have equal rights. It was before the war, Second World War, and women's role in society was not as equal as what it is now. And so there were a lot of sort of white middle class Christian principles at play, and a lot of righteous judgment of people if they weren't being seen to be doing the right thing. In chapter 1, he talked about if you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive.
Yeah, I like that title.
Yeah, he talked about rewarding good behavior rather than punishing for bad. And he gave one of the great stories in that one was the Gettysburg story with Lincoln and General Meade, where General Meade didn't follow Lincoln's instructions and could have ended the American Civil War much sooner, where he had the Confederates pinned up against the Potomac River. but he didn't attack because he basically kind of chickened out. And Lincoln wrote this letter of condemnation of his general, saying, why didn't you follow my orders? But then the letter was discovered amongst his personal papers many years afterwards that he actually never sent that letter. And in fact, instead, he realized that to condemn his general would have been to not really understand things from the general's point of view, that he had probably seen a lot more bloodshed and really didn't want to fight that next battle. Instead, he tried to sue for peace talks. So he thought he was doing the right thing to avoid loss of life. Whereas Lincoln was thinking in terms of, let's just finish the war. Here's our chance. And so by putting himself in the general's position, he then decided that it was better not to send that letter, even though he was frustrated and annoyed that his instructions hadn't been followed. So it was a good example of where criticizing another person can be futile. It doesn't really get the result that you'd hope that it would. It actually just gets the other person's back up.
And interestingly so, because all these orders were coming from somebody that wasn't even on site.
Yes, that's
you
right.
know, that was typical of the wars, wasn't it? All these generals making decisions for people that weren't even there.
Yeah, that's right. When people are behind the scenes, it's easy to send people to their death, isn't it? Rather than you're the one that has to face
It's
it.
like our today's armchair experts, you know.
The keyboard warriors.
I haven't heard that one.
Very quick to post things on social media and slag people off.
Yeah.
And without actually taking the trouble to maybe understand why the person thinks the way they do or feels the way they do.
I've done it myself in the past.
So what else? There was a nice little poem at the end or story with Father Forget. Father, it's called Father Forget.
Yeah. It's just
the father is apologizing, sitting with his son who's asleep in bed, little toddler, and he's apologizing to him for being mean to him and criticizing him, and treating him as if he was an adult and not behaving like he was an adult, but remembering that he was actually still just a child and should be treated.
As a special needs teacher, I've seen that so often, and often from the most intelligent people. That they make the most god-awful parents sometimes because they intellectualize everything and they're unaware of the child development stages and what they can take in or can't take in at each age.
Yeah, well, it's easy to overlook that when you're focused on being busy and the stuff that you've got to get done as an adult, and all the pressures that you have, and to forget
that as well.
Children, and that they don't think that way, and they're not encumbered by all the stuff that you're dealing with.
I haven't even got the capacity to absorb it,
Yeah. So chapter 2 in that first section was, in part 1, was about the big secret of dealing with people, which is making the other person want to do whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. Right, so in other words, it's their idea rather than your idea. And William James was quoted there, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. We all want to feel appreciated and to some degree important, at least that we're heard or seen or noticed. And there was even I thought that was a very interesting twist where he said that some people go insane so they can feel more important in an imaginary world.
That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? So what else? Oh, he talked about
our leaders.
Andrew Carnegie, how he paid Charles Schwab $3,000 a day, which is $1 million a year, because of his ability to deal with people. More than $1 million a year, isn't it? So yes, the ability to deal with people is a highly prized attribute, probably more so than just being focused on results, but if you focus on dealing with people, you'll get the results anyway. What else? Oh, he talked about that runaway wives. See, again, it doesn't say runaway husbands, it says runaway wives would leave because they were not appreciated very often. And the great quote from Emerson, every man is my superior in some way, in that I learn of him. So my father always used to say that everyone has something to teach you. And if you can keep that sort of open mind, then you'll hear people, you'll listen to and try to understand what they're saying and why things are important to them. Right, then chapter 3, he said, he who can do this has the whole world with him, and he who cannot walks a lonely way. So we are interested in what we want, but if we can actually get interested in what the other person wants and try to find the coincidence of the two, that look for the win-win situation, then we will have a far greater chance of getting what we want, because we will influence those people as well. Okay, so that was the first section, part 1, and in part 2, I'll just refer back to the book here. For some reason, I can't find my notes from that. So, fundamental techniques we covered in section 1. Part 2 was 6 ways to make people like you. So there was a certain amount of repetition there and some of the principles, but nevertheless, that was the do this and you'll be welcome anywhere. So being interested in people, genuinely interested in people though, not just paying lip service to it. And greeting people with animation and enthusiasm, like hopefully we all greeted each other when we came on the call this morning, which sometimes can be hard to do if you're half asleep and you're tired and or you're preoccupied with stuff that you're dealing with. And we have to sometimes put that to one side and just be present and remember that that other person that you're just encountering isn't dealing with all that stuff that you might be dealing with.
And probably doesn't want to.
So that was principle number 1, which was to become genuinely interested in other people.
That greeting thing is especially important with the masterminds, because everybody's at a different end of the clock, it seems,
That's
where
so true.
I'm wrapping up my day, Tony, and you're starting yours, and Vicky's somewhere in the middle, and
Yeah, it's nearly 12 here now.
And that's why it's so important to be present, because then you just, it transcends all of those geographical and time restrictions. So section 2 was about smiling, just remembering to smile. And I gave the example, we used to tell my staff that when they answered the phone in business, to smile as they answered the phone. And it's amazing how that comes through the phone line. It's something that people pick up on intuitively. So smiling actions speak louder than words, and a smile says, I like you, you make me happy, I am glad to see you. And then he talks about dogs and why dogs are such a hit, because dogs are always pleased to see you, no matter what you've been up to or where you've been. And he even talked about the smile going through the phone line in this as well.
Energy, you see, isn't it?
It
Changes
is energy. It is. And it's infectious, if you give people a smile, very often they'll smile back at you. And it can change people's lives. So that was the second one. The third one was, I'm just flicking through the book here, remembering that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. So it's so easy. And so how many times do you have a conversation, you're introduced to somebody and then you think, hang on, I was told their name, but I can't think what it was now. And it's because we haven't taken the trouble to really lock it in the first place. We've kind of, it's gone in one ear and out the other, and we're probably thinking about what we're going to say next or thinking about something else. And so it was something that I worked on a lot when I was running a backpackers in tourism. I'd have 60 people staying with me at any time, and I knew the names of nearly all of them, and I would do it by associating something. So it might be, Julie from New Zealand, or Vicky, the intrepid Canadian traveler.
A good NLP trick.
Yeah. And if you can cluster a couple of things as well, then it really does cement it, and then use that person's name in conversation so that you
it's a great skill, Tony, and it's something that I'm really, really poor at, and I want to kick myself because the name just disappears, and it always has done.
To start with, kicking yourself is very hard. You'll fall over. And you'll look very
Yeah, I really need to pay attention to that, you know. And for instance, I listened to a wonderful thing the other day, and the name was Brian Smith, for goodness sake. And do you think I'd even took any notice of that? You know, I had to go back and look at Brian Smith. You know,
Are you open to receiving a helpful tip in that area?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, one thing is stop telling yourself that you're no good at it.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes. Yeah, thank
Because
you for
that just cements that belief. All right. So this is an NLP observation. You can reword that as I used to be no good at it, but now I'm improving.
I need to pay more attention to that again.
Self-talk is so important. You know, we've got to catch ourselves with what we say.
Yeah.
Because it really can profoundly influence how we are. And so
Definitely.
we label ourselves, or we put ourselves down, and then we make that a belief, and then we keep reinforcing it. So every time you tell everyone, oh, I'm no good at remembering names, guess what? You carry on being no good.
And I even know that.
So the simple way of that is just to put a bit of a focus on it and think, okay, the next day, today, I'm going to remember everyone whose names I'm introduced to, and find a way of associating something with that person's name.
Who said that?
So the fourth one was an easy way to become a good conversationalist. And principle 4 was to be a good listener, to encourage others to talk about themselves. I'm sure we all know people who love to talk about themselves and tell you all their problems. We have to be good listeners. The interesting thing about that one was, you know, when you're introduced to someone and you're listening to them, they will then probably say that you were a very good conversationalist. But in fact, all you did was listen.
Yes.
People's number one priority really is themselves. So they like to talk about themselves. And if you'll give them that forum and you'll let them talk, then they'll think that you're a very good conversationalist. But in fact, you just listened. And we're interested. That's another little key add-on.
Yeah.
Or at least you appeared to be anyway.
Well, if you're not interested, you wouldn't be listening, actually, would you?
Right. Well said, Julie.
Wait, people can pretend to be interested and not be listening also.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Not saying that none of us are doing that, of course, but I'm just saying.
Principle 5 there was to talk in terms of the other person's interests. So don't drone on about stuff that interests you and you know it doesn't really interest them. Find out what it is that they're interested in. And then even if it's something that you're not that familiar with, maybe just ask them some questions because you might learn something. So it's an opportunity rather than just droning on about yourself. And the 6th way to make people like you was to make the other person feel important and to do it sincerely, which by listening to someone, you are to a degree making them feel important anyway, because you're giving them that forum to, and especially if you're allowing them to talk about what interests them and you're smiling and all the other principles that you've just heard. So, and guess what? That chapter included the golden rule. So that's to give unto others what we would have given unto us, which he said, this was an interesting twist, that Jesus summed it up in one thought as do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So it was more active rather than passive. Which
chapter was that in, Tony?
Page 101, which was chapter 6 of
different page
of the second part. And to use phrases of respect such as, I'm sorry to trouble you, or would you be so kind as to, or would you mind, these little things. He said, oil the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life. Does anyone feel it's a monotonous grind? I hope they don't feel it's a monotonous grind. Okay. That about brings us up to date, I think, to what we were here to talk about today. So just to refresh, those 6 ways to make people like you were: 1, to become genuinely interested in other people; 2, smile; 3, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language; 4, be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves; 5, to talk in terms of other people's interests; 6, to make the other person feel important and to do it sincerely. Which brings us to part 3. And rather than go on talking myself, I'll just introduce this quickly and then throw it open for discussion. So the first chapter in that section, part 3, is that you can't win an argument. Why can't you win an argument? I know you haven't all read this, but what's your theories on why you can't win an argument?
Because it's just 2 different points of view.
Yes. And what if those points of view are firmly entrenched?
You'll
Because
never
everybody's
win.
view of
Start to
what's right and
argue.
wrong is different.
Then defensiveness kicks in.
Yes.
No, everybody wants to save face, so nobody's backing down. So somebody needs to be the bigger person and say, you know what? The sun does rise in the west. I was incorrect.
Spot on, Karen.
Have a smile. No, I'm just kidding.
I've just realized something in doing that review. I haven't done the Noble Goldman principle. Shall we quickly cover that, even though we're halfway through the meeting, or do you want to skip that? I don't
I
mind.
knew there was something wrong.
I
Someone
thought
did-
maybe you changed it up, Tony. That's all. I was like, okay.
I just figured, obviously no one was listening, and let's do it quickly, just for the sake of reminding ourselves of the importance of these things. So if we go, Vicky, if you want to be number 1, Julie number 2, Coralie, I think you can't speak at the moment, so we'll miss you out. So Karen, if you go number 3.
She's gone, Coralie.
Oh, she's gone, has she? Okay, we've lost her.
Mm.
Chris, number 4.
I won't be able to read it. It's just too small for me on my phone.
Okay, no worries. I'll go number 4 then. So it's just the 4 of us reading it out. Let's do it.
Okay. Mastermind principles. The purpose of the mastermind is to learn leadership, build teams, and create multiple sources of income together.
We are here to inspire and challenge each other to reach and exceed goals.
Each member is committed to their own success as well as the success of every member of the group.
We are committed to meeting in person or virtually for 1 hour every week.
We are present. There is no multitasking or distractions during meetings.
We are collaborative. We listen without interrupting, lecturing, or judging.
We celebrate each other's successes without jealousy.
We are honest and participate by giving thoughtful feedback.
We are open and listen to different perspectives without being defensive or offering excuses.
We trust fellow members enough to share fully.
We are focused, but we also think it's important to have fun during meetings.
I think we missed Karen.
We did.
I'll kick in here. We're real and authentic. This is a no BS zone. I was zoning out. I'm sorry.
That's the honest part.
Where are we now?
13, I
Vicky.
think we're at number
Vicky.
13. Okay. We allow ourselves to become completely aligned with each other and the high forces, one mind, one soul, one love.
Noble Goldman International is a conscious, aware, and engaged global community of abundance and freedom creators.
Our mission is to create 1 million millionaires who are free from the time for money paradigm. We focus on creating multiple streams of income through mastermind, team building, and the effective utilization of the internet-based platforms.
The mastermind becomes an opportunity for self-mastery, where the self-transcendent shift from the me to the we to the us occurs. As congruence and engagement increases, The world's consciousness is then raised one meaningful and inspired relationship at a time. So did anyone notice how relevant those principles were to what we've been talking about?
Absolutely.
And how in alignment they are?
And you know how they also run through many ancient philosophies and from other cultures.
Yeah. Yeah, they say there's nothing new, really. It's just reminding ourselves of things we've already forgotten.
Yep.
So at least by going back through this, it puts it in the forefront of our minds. You know, we all know that to make a difference, to welcome people, we smile, and yet it's easy to forget to do that. We all know that it's important to use somebody else's name, and yet we forget their name. And we know that they really want to talk about themselves, and yet sometimes we try and monopolize the conversation and talk about ourselves. There's not much new here, but it's just reminding ourselves of these things and putting them back to the forefront of our minds for more.
I think the main thing is to do it not just when you're meeting in a business setting or meeting the new in-laws or something, to remember to implement this in daily life, to have it be second nature. Kind of makes the world a better place. Julie, there's a couple of things that I do to remember names. The first one is I repeat it back. So I'll say, did I hear you correctly? Did you say da, da, da? This
Yeah,
way,
that's a good one.
I put it on me that I'm not hearing right. Did I hear you correctly? The second one, this one you have to watch because I've forgotten people's names doing this, but I make up something in my mind about them, like Bobby Big Shoes or something like that in my head. And I just keep something like that running in my head. And now a lot of times what will happen is when I first see that person, that nickname that I created pops in my head first, but then I'm like, okay, it's just Bobby. All right. Hi, Bobby. How are you? You know, that helped me because I used to have a really bad habit of simply not paying attention during an introduction. That's what it amounted to. I just was not fully paying attention.
And I think that's exactly it, Karen. And I'm always too busy to start talking and answering back and not listening. I think this is the biggest thing is I'm always in a hurry. Yeah.
Well, and if you just slow it down, and like I said, the most effective for me was when, like, while I'm shaking their hand, I'll be like, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I heard your full name. And then they can repeat it for me. Then I'll repeat it like 3 times in my head, you know,
Yeah.
Bobby Bowtie, Bobby Bowtie, or whatever, you know.
It's all about, it is all about slowing down, isn't it, really?
Slowing down and paying attention, yeah.
And sometimes just being completely honest and saying, I'm really sorry, I didn't hear your name properly. Could I ask you again? Sometimes just being brutally honest, just, you know, it's not, if you do it with sincerity, it's not going to come across like I don't care about you. It's going to come across like I just it didn't stick. And very often they'll say, I'm sorry, I forgot your name too.
Yes, yeah. Or if it's a complicated name that's not in your native tongue. I mean, I'll often make a joke about it with people. I'll be like, wow, that's quite a mouthful. I'm definitely going to need you to say that again. And then they laugh. Usually, I've never had anybody get aggravated with me. And they're like, yeah, you're right. And then, like you said, Tony, more often than not, I get, and I didn't get yours either. So it's a reciprocal correction.
Yeah, or you can say something like, oh, that's a really unique name. I haven't heard that one before. Sorry, what was that again? But the trouble is, if they then come back with something like it's Julie, you go, well, yes, I have Julie.
I don't get out much.
When I had my book launch meeting and I was signing everybody's books, and there was somebody that came up and I couldn't remember their name, and I just went, oh, I'm sorry, how do you spell your name again? Something like Bill, B-I-L-L or something. Just anyway. Oh, the usual way then. Yes,
Oh.
you can come unstuck with trying to be sneaky. Sometimes it's just better just be honest.
Yeah, be honest, yeah.
Well, if you do it right at the introduction, I think there's a larger leeway. If it's like the second or third time you met them and you're like, oh God, I can't remember this guy's name. My husband used to do that all the time. And he would like be, oh, this guy's coming to talk to us. What the hell is his name again? I'm like, you know, you really need to pay attention. One of these days, I'm going to leave you high and dry.
And don't you love hearing that? Oh, you really need to pay attention.
He was the worst about that. He was so terrible about, and he even admitted, he goes, I don't pay attention. I said, well, how about if we try? And it never worked. He never got it.
Okay, well, so just going back to this chapter, the principle about why you can't win an argument, and it's because he says you can't win an argument. You can't, because if you lose it, you lose it, and if you win it, you lose it. Why? Well, suppose you triumph over the other man and shoot his argument full of holes and prove that he's wrong and non compos mentis. Then what? You will feel fine, but what about him? You've made him feel inferior. You've hurt his pride. He will resent your triumph. I think we might have Coralie trying to get back in. So you can, we're waiting to see who it is. Is it going to be Coralie? Dun, dun, dun.
No, it's Yvonne.
It's
And
iPhone.
Yvonne's living in, she's in Perth. Hi, Yvonne.
Oh, hello.
Have you all met Yvonne? No, you might not have.
No.
Yvonne's
Welcome.
from New Zealand and she's staying with her brother in, what's the name of the town, Yvonne?
Tom Price.
Tom
Tom
Price.
Price. Okay. That's a nice area. Beautiful scenery up that way.
So Tony's from the Channel Islands originally. And now he lives in Perth.
Yeah, been here quite a while now.
Yvonne's one of my water Kangan mates from way back. Well,
Well,
not way back, it's a couple of years ago. Isn't it?
So I'm not going to repeat everything we've just said because we've been all day. But we're just talking about this chapter, which is chapter 1 of part 3. And he comes out with an article that was mentioned in Bits and Pieces, which is published by the Economic Press. And he uses these suggestions on how to keep a disagreement from becoming an argument. Because we just stated that you can't win an argument because you'll be trying to convince the other person that you're right and they're wrong. So welcome the disagreement. So perhaps this disagreement is your opportunity to be corrected before you make a serious mistake. What if you are wrong? So if you're open to the possibility that there may be some new information that you are not aware of, then you can allow that to happen, allow it to be brought to your attention. Keep an open mind. Distrust.
Russ follows this, doesn't he? He's really sounds like Russ.
Embodies the principles of this.
Absolutely.
Book. Sure.
In fact, he loves an argument, doesn't he? He loves Tell me more about it.
He loves being able to explore why people think what they do. And so then he will very diplomatically, which is following the principles in here, come back with something like, are you open to the possibility of a different way of looking at that? So distrust your first instinctive impression, which is to be defensive. If you disagree with what the other person's saying, you hold your belief very firmly, you can feel that you're being attacked, and so you need to defend yourself. But in fact, the other person may just not have the same information that you do, or they may have been perhaps misinformed, but perhaps experience has taught them something different. Their experiences may not be the same as yours. So you have to explore why, rather than sort of jumping in and wanting to be defensive, just consider that maybe they have a good reason for believing the thing that they do. Control your temper. How about that one? Anyone experience that, where you're immediately triggered by something someone said, rather than just letting it go smoothly and considering they might have a different way of looking at things? Listen first.
A lot of money stopping that habit. coaching and whatnot.
And you can lose a lot of money by not following it too. That's the thing. If you can keep calm and allow the other person to express their opinion, you may find the common ground. So listening first, giving your opponent a chance to talk, and then looking for trying to understand why they think what they think. So looking for areas where you agree, starting off with, well, let's agree on this, even if we can't agree on that, and then we'll, then at least you've built some kind of a bridge. Being honest, well, that sort of speaks for itself rather loudly, doesn't it? And that's a core principle of both Think and Grow Rich and this book and the 4 Agreements. Promise to think over your opponent's ideas and study them carefully. So even if you can't agree there and then, what if you said, actually, I'm going to give what you've said some thought. I'll come back to you on that. I'm going to go away and think about it and maybe do a bit more research or something. So you haven't sort of got into an argument with them there and then. You've considered the possibility that you might be wrong, or there might be new information that you need, and you'll go away and think about it. Thank your opponent sincerely for their interest. And it's interesting he uses the word opponent, isn't it? So if someone takes the time to disagree with you, then there must be some interest in that area. So think of them as somebody who may want to help you by improving your knowledge in that area. You might then turn an opponent into a friend. Postpone action to give both sides time to think through the problem. So by postponing any action or decision, you might also give them a chance to go away and think about what you've said, and that they might change their mind as well, rather than trying to argue with them and force your opinion upon them. So principle number 1 in that first chapter in section 3 was the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Can you repeat that? Sorry, Tony, I'm a little bit distracted by Christopher's cat trying to climb up and jump across to the higher dresser there. So cute.
Beautiful cat.
So cute.
There you go. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it.
Agree. I would. To me, it's not worth arguing most of the time.
Arguing usually doesn't work, does it? You usually, like it says, you might win the argument, but do you really win? Not if you've upset the other person or made them feel inferior, or made them stand down and backtrack. There was a great example I was listening to on the audio. I think it's in the book somewhere as well, but it was in the audio section, and it was Carnegie going to an after dinner speech, and the gentleman quoting a quote that he said was from the Bible, but in fact it was from Shakespeare. And then Carnegie,
big difference.
the need to correct him, and his mates kicking him under the table, going, we're a guest at this dinner. Don't disagree with the guy, because all you're doing is sort of making him feel bad, embarrassing him. Exactly. So embarrassing someone is not the way to win, is it? It's not the way to influence people or win a friend.
What is it?
It might temporarily make you feel better because you've won the argument, but what have you really won?
Like in scary sense of me.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Can I ask a question? So if you think of an argument, instead of thinking of it that way and just thinking of 2 people having a conversation where you're both willing to listen to each other and just have a discussion.
I want to take a photo.
I prefer to think of it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So any other thoughts on that one? Avoiding an argument in the first place, or any of those points that were highlighted there? There was a quote in there. Buddha said, hatred is never ended by hatred, but by love. And this is not the part of the quote, I don't think, but it says, a misunderstanding is never ended by an argument, but by tact, diplomacy, conciliation, and a sympathetic desire to see the other person's viewpoint. So we're all being tactful and diplomatic, and everyone's agreeing with me. Okay. Well, we've got time to cover one more chapter if you wish to. But it does rather reinforce what was just said in this chapter. So this is chapter 2 of part 3, and the principle number 2 of this section is show respect for the other person's opinions. Never say you're wrong.
Yep.
Theodore Roosevelt was in the White House, and he confessed that if he could be right 75% of the time, he would reach the highest measure of his expectation. And he goes on to say, Carnegie says, if you can be sure of being right only 55% of the time, you can go down to Wall Street and make $1 million a day. But if you can't be sure of being right 55% of the time, why would you tell other people that they're wrong? I thought that was a very interesting section, very interesting quote. But we do tend to think that we're right, don't we? Or do we?
Absolutely, absolutely. People think that their ideas, their thoughts and what have you are right. And I mean, I know the area that I live in here in Pennsylvania, Eastern US, the people here, they dig their heels in. I mean, you just don't argue. They just dig their heels in, and they don't want to hear. They don't want to meet you halfway. It's the locals, and they don't want to hear it. So I smile and nod a lot. Okay. And I just leave and roll my eyes when I get in the car, like, all right, I need to. It took me a long time. I've lived in this area for quite some time. And it's a very, it is in the Northeast. It's Pennsylvania Dutch area. And it's just a very odd area, very passive aggressive. I'm from New York originally, so we're just openly aggressive. We don't keep it a secret. We just come right at you.
Now, I thought that all changed. I thought that all changed, Karen, when 9/11 happened. I thought all New Yorkers suddenly all became friendly and caring.
Okay, you believe that. Watch your wallet when you go to the city. Keep your wallet in your front pocket. No, but because the portion about smiling in the first section, I had to laugh because in this area, people, they don't like if you're not from around here. And you can live here for 40 years, you're not from around here. So it's kind of comical, really. And they're really tight with a buck. They don't like giving anything away. So the small town I used to live in, we lived on Main Street. So I would go for evening walks and I'd be like, smart walk by. And it's just, to me, I always just, hi, how are you? And people just glare at you. And it really got to me after a while. I'm like, you know what? The next one that does this to me, I'm going to say something. And I was with my son and my husband at the time. They're like, please don't. I'm like, no, I can't do this another. I had been there for several months. So I walked by and I said, good evening to somebody, and I had a big smile, and they just stared at me. And it just really irked me. I said, just smile back. They're free. It's not going to cost you a penny. And I just waved and kept going. But I did hear them laughing when we walked away. My son was a teenager. He was like, please promise you're never going to do that again. I'm like, oh, game on, sweetie, game on. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just strange. But I mean, some people will be more open with you than others. And like Vicky, the older I get, I don't want to argue. I really, I just think in my head, well, there goes another 20 minutes of my life I'm never getting back, and that's kind of the mentality that I run with. So I don't really argue unless it's a safety issue for that person. Then I will be more adamant, and I will argue more for them or their kids or something. But otherwise, I find it easier as I get older to walk away from an argument. Like, okay, you're right. Okay, that's fine. Have a nice day.
That's a great observation, Karen. I think that the thing is, if we can say to ourselves, does it really matter if I win that argument? Is it that important? If I just let it go and allow the other person to carry on believing what they believe, if that's what they want to believe, does it really matter? Is it going to change my life? Why do I have to feel like I need to change their opinion?
Or, finish the conversation with, well, maybe we could just agree to differ,
Yeah.
I often do that.
Disagree is a line I've used a lot. Just like, but like around here, the politics, the red and the blue, it was crazy here. And the coronavirus, my washer machine had broken down, and my brother was visiting, and I'd been in a car accident, so I had no car, no washer. I'm like, dude, you're taking me to the laundromat. And he's like, all right, that's fine. And so this town where the laundromat is like super, super conservative, like Trump to the death, you know, that was just kind of the way that they were. So we're sitting outside on a bench and the wash is doing its thing. And this woman walks up, and I could just tell by the look of her. I leaned to my brother. I said, just smile and let this one go. And of course, he's like, oh, he goes, I don't think I can do that. And I'm like, I'm going in to check the wash. So the woman started on about, you know, the Republic, the Democrats, and they're useless, and you know, that's fine. We have the right to express our opinion, but they get mad when you don't agree with their opinion. That's why I just smile and nod, especially with this kind of stuff. The vaccine, the virus, and the politics. I just go, wow, yeah. How about that? You know, and so I could see this woman really gearing up. And I just said to my brother, I said, if you want to wait here, that's fine, but I could probably use your help in the laundromat. I'm giving Dopey an exit from this conversation, you know? And he's like, no, I think you got it. And I'm like, okay. And I just went in the laundromat. He comes in and he's like, because I mean, like, I had unloaded 3 loads, I folded them, they were back in my baskets, I'm ready to go. And he comes in and he goes, why weren't you more insistent? I'm like, hey, I left the door wide open for you to get out of that conversation. I said, I told you before we got here, crazy lives in this town, and we don't argue with crazy. We smile and nod and walk away from it. I said, he goes, she just went on, he goes, she just enveloped everything. And I said, that's why we smile and nod. That's why we leave it at, hello, how are you? And keep moving so that they continue to understand that how are you is a greeting. I don't really want to hear your life. It's merely a greeting. I don't say how are you anymore. Now I just say, you know, hi, have a magical day, or create a beautiful day for yourself today. And I just keep going, because then they think you're a freak and they stop talking to you. And I genuinely mean what I said, and I don't need to get my ear chewed off by a crazy person. So, you know, yeah, that was funny with him. So now every time he comes to visit, he's like, I'm just gonna sit in the car. I'm like, it's the grocery store. No, I'll just wait here in the car for you. I'm good. So.
That's a great share, Karen, because trying to win an argument with someone who has a completely diametrically opposed view to you, what are you going to achieve? You are really, who's the crazier person? The crazy person, or the person trying to win over a crazy person?
Plus the chances of me seeing this woman again are like 1 in a billion. It was just a fluke. I mean, that we met, because I take that into consideration too.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not even going to see or hear this person ever again. That's what kind of surprises me, when people worry about what other people think. Like, why do you care? You're never going to see this person again. They don't know you. You don't know them. You know, get busy doing you. Don't worry about it. Okami.
Yes. So, to start with, ask yourself, is this worth even getting into an argument over? But you've highlighted 2 things that I was going to bring up as to the relevance. You've picked these things perfectly that I was going to mention. The relevance of this book could not be more timely. We're going through probably one of the most divisive periods in my memory, certainly. I don't know what other people feel about that, but we've had the American political situation where that affected everyone around the world, not just the people in America, but everyone here in Australia had an opinion about, you know, Trump's either fantastic or he's a loser, whichever way you jumped. And now the vaccine debate is going nuts in Australia. You know, it's becoming the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated.
Oh, I know, it's terrible. It's worse than here.
And so everyone's got an opinion on this, you know, whether they should be taking the vaccine. They've got a conspiracy theory as to why you shouldn't. They've got the health implications of, and there's so much misinformation out there that you're arguing with people who don't even have all the facts anyway, when you don't know that you have all the facts. So why are we arguing about it?
The internet's like the world's largest gossip machine. I mean, you know, it's a useful tool, but some stuff you just have to think for yourself. You have to pull up your common sense by the bootstraps and start using it.
Yeah.
Because there's so much nonsense peddled on it. The conspiracy theories there's a conspiracy theory for everything. Everything.
Yes.
And you know, you have to use a little bit of your own horse sense to figure out what is what. But I mean, the hatred about the vaxxers and the non-vaxxers, that's insane. That's just insane.
It is. So this is really timely. I'll just to finish off, because I'm conscious of time coming up. Just to finish off on this chapter then doesn't talk about vaccinations, but it talks about the fact that you can't teach a person anything. This is a Galileo quote. You cannot teach a man anything. You can only help him to find it within himself. And Socrates brilliantly says, one thing only that I know, and that is that I know nothing. So he goes on to say that one of the key ways to address this potential for an argument is to say, if a person makes a statement that you think is wrong, yes, even that you know is wrong, isn't it better to begin by saying, well, now look, I thought otherwise, but I may be wrong. I frequently am, and if I'm wrong, I want to be put right. Let's examine the facts together. You might not say it exactly like that, but the starting point was, I may be wrong. So you're giving the person the possibility that you're not trying to assert your opinion over theirs, that you're open to discussing it, or you're open to looking at it from a different perspective if they can offer one. So in other words, it's kind of, if you think the opposite, then explain to me why. If you want to hear it, that is. Of course, Karen's got the right point there, that if you don't want to hear it, don't get into it in the first place. But if it's something you do want to debate with someone, then by admitting that you might be wrong, that you may not have all the facts, you're not being aggressively asserting your viewpoint over theirs. And they may then reciprocate and say, well, I might be wrong too. So
another lovely one that I had my beautiful artist friend who's passed away ages ago, she wrote books, little poetry books, and one of her sayings was, let's just celebrate our exciting differences.
Yes, and the other point that's raised here that I thought was really important was that we may prove that other person that they've made an error in judgment, and we don't like to have any truth even that reflects on our judgment. We don't mind if we can say, oh, actually I got that one wrong, but we don't want to be told that we were wrong by somebody else, do we?
No, definitely not.
I think a lot of people are surprised though when you admit a mistake or that you're wrong and you say, oh, I made a mistake or I was wrong. Like sometimes the reaction of the other person is like they're almost stunned that you've said that.
It sort of deflates the whole argument potential, doesn't it? Because it stops them in their tracks, because it's like, you're not going to argue with me about this? No, I'm admitting straight away that I'm wrong, or I may be wrong. Then
it's because we're in a blame culture.
Then you've given them nowhere to go. And actually what it'll then do is they're more likely to forgive you if you've done something wrong. If you go, I admit it, I'm honest, actually, you're completely right, I stuffed up there, my fault, I won't do that again. Where do they go from there? And that's something, and I don't know, because I'm getting mixed up now because I'm listening to the audio recording of the update, which is about the digital age as well. And he talks in that if you admit up front that you're wrong, it really diffuses the whole potential for an argument. And in fact, that they use that as one of the greatest assessments of whether you're going to be a great leader or a great manager. If you're going for a high level position, the fact that you can admit your mistakes quickly, people have more respect for you, rather than if you're trying to cover it up and go, well, I wasn't really wrong, and you're trying to defend why you made that decision. But instead, if you just go, yeah, you're right, I stuffed up, I've got that wrong, I'm admitting to it, from now on we'll do it this way. Let's move forwards. There's no reason for people to keep having a go at you then, is there? If you've admitted it.
Yeah, I definitely think by disarming it that way, or just, I mean, just being honest, because for me, I just come clean right away, because truthfully, I don't want to carry the baggage of jacking something up and not admitting it. It's just easier to say, you know what, this was all me, and I'm sorry, and I thought I did it right, but apparently I didn't, so please help me. And I think once you do that, even a true brute is not going to keep kicking, you know. They're just going to be like, oh, okay, you know what, you're right. All right, you need my help? Because I think that no matter how abrasive people are, I think in general, most people are good and they want to be helpful. And some of them are misdirected or don't know how to do it, or do it in an odd way or what have you. But I think that at the core of it, that really for the most part, people are good. I mean, this crazy hurricane tore the living hell out of the US here. And there's so many stories of people that are flying animals and getting boats and rescuing people. And I mean, we've got, the West is on fire. The South and the Northeast here are drowning. The rest of them are hot. And so I do think that even politics get put aside. I mean, and in this time with the natural disaster and stuff, it's like nobody cares who you voted for. Nobody cares about your vaccination. We know we got to get your baby out of that car that's floating down the road. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of renews your faith. I mean, it's horrible what's happening. We had 6 tornadoes blow through, but it's very heartwarming to see humanity remember its humanity, you know, and that's very cool to see for me. So
that's a great observation, Karen. I think whenever there's times of crisis and a community comes together to help each other, whatever you disagree about just becomes irrelevant. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because you're really just trying to keep on working for the common good.
Maslow's law.
Yeah. So if we can adopt that philosophy of, and there are some people who instead believe that everyone's out to stuff everything up, or they're out just for themselves. Yeah. If you hold the belief instead that most people genuinely have a good intention, if you allow them to flow that through, rather than like I always think with the workplace situation, people don't come into work thinking, how can I stuff everything up today and how can I really annoy my boss? They come in trying to do a good job generally, and yeah, we're all human, we all make mistakes. But don't you feel, as if you've ever had somebody working with you and they've made a mistake, but they admit to it straight away, how do you feel towards them then? You don't feel so angry. You immediately think, okay, well, they've got it wrong. They're human. They've admitted it. Let's just move forward. So we've covered
to the real abrasive people. They're hurt. They're damaged, and that's why they're spitting fire out at you. You know, a lot of times if you just take a minute or so to just take a peek behind the curtain, or, you know, just even sometimes you can hear in the anger what the damage or the hurt of them, you know. And so that, I mean, I was married to a severe narcissist not too long ago, and it was a nightmare, and it was a crazy time. But honestly, because my family's like, you must hate him. And I'm like, you know what? I don't. I said, I'm sad for him because he is so broken and damaged. He will never.
Was he a Trump supporter?
No, he was actually, I'm half Italian and he was from Italy. I went through 54 years of my life never dating an Italian because half my family is crazy. So I stayed away from them. And here, purebred breed lands on my doorstep. I married him, and it was crazy. It was insane. But anyway, but
we
no, and I
think about.
What's that?
We attract what we think about. Remember?
Oh, sure. You know, it's funny. Well, I did take a good look because I'm like, hey, that's my second narcissist. I have to take a look, Because I did start dating this guy not too long ago, and I picked up, like, I smelled he was a narcissist right away. By the third time, I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work for me. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, I know this is not going to work for me. It'll work great for you. It's not going to work for me, you know? And so anyway, but I mean, when you see that somebody's damaged, how can you get annoyed? How can you get angry? How can you be hateful? They're damaged. What are you going to do? You hope that they find their way, but yeah, what are you going to do? Anyway.
You've led on to the perfect ending for this, actually perfect segue, because right towards the end of this chapter, there's a quote from a psychologist called Carl Rogers in his book On Becoming a Person.
Carl Rogers was great.
And he says, I have found it of enormous value when I can permit myself to understand the other person. The way in which I have worded this statement may seem strange to you. Is it necessary to permit oneself to understand another? I think it is. Our first reaction to most of the statements which we hear from other people is an evaluation or judgment rather than an understanding of it. When someone expresses some feeling, attitude, or belief, our tendency is almost immediately to feel that's right, or that's stupid, or that's abnormal, or that's unreasonable, that's incorrect, that's not nice. Very rarely do we permit ourselves to understand precisely what the meaning of the statement is to the other person.
Is that chapter 11? Well,
Well, in my version, I've got the an old version of the book, but it's part 3, chapter 2.
oh, okay.
I don't know whether the updated version has got. Well, this
I
is
haven't got an updated version. I've got the old one.
Oh, maybe I've got the updated version then. Because
I'm just working off a PDF.
Yes,
so.
this was copyright 1936, but revised 1981 by Dale Carnegie and Dorothy Carnegie. So it's a 1981 version I've got here. So I can't.
yeah. Preface revised by Dorothy Carnegie.
Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting point, that the more we try to understand people, we don't necessarily have to agree with them, but at least we can understand why they think the way they do. And one good bridge builder there is to say, I understand why you think that. If I had the same experience or believed the same thing as you, I would probably think the same thing. Don't follow that up with but. The word but tends to say and is what the suggestion was.
I hate the word but. It's like as soon as somebody says but to me, I'm like, just stop talking because I'm done listening. It's like I don't even want to hear the but, because nothing good comes after but. That's how my mom was notorious for compliments like that. She still is. She lives with me. She's like, honey, that outfit looks really good, but, and I'm like, goodbye, I'm heading out now, have a good night. And just, I don't even want to hear but, I don't need to hear it. Because just destructive language follows but. That's why whenever someone says it to me, just stop there, because I'm done listening. My son cracks up when I do that, because he used to be the king of but. He'd be like, but mom, and I'm like, but mom, she ain't listening, goodbye. And now, because he's an adult, I'll hang up. And I'm just like, okay, you got a butt? Okay, and we all have butts, bye. And
I agree with you, Karen, but we're at the end of the time.
I'm done listening.
Would everyone like to just give us one thing that, from what we've discussed this morning, one thing that you're going to work on that you feel you can implement that's going to help you moving forwards? Vicky, would you like to start off with that?
Thing to implement. I think I'm going to go with what Karen said, because I'm in the middle of writing an article and I put quite a few buts in there, and now I'm like, I think I should change that.
Okay. So Vicky's going to avoid the word but.
The BUT version.
Yes.
You could use something like, you may want to consider, however.
Yes, I have other, I know. Yeah, there are
However,
other words I can use. No, thank you, Karen. I actually appreciate you saying that because I don't do it much, but usually when I add it, it's not to make the opposite. It's just to like, I don't know. I think it's an unneeded word.
It is. It's been overused, hasn't it?
It's certainly
Yeah.
one to watch out for. Julie, what would you
Yeah.
like to take away from today? That you're
I
gonna...
was just thinking about well, first of all, it was the names thing, but I'm also thinking about a lot of other things that the listening part, and if the listening part has to go on too long, what do you do? And all sorts of things. You know, it's really interesting. I'm going to really get into this now because I like it.
Very good. Karen.
One thing that's a major weakness for me that I'm always working on is to listen to hear, not answer.
Yeah. That's certainly something we can all take on board.
Mhm.
Very good. Chris.
The thing is, I'm quite adversarial. I mean, the lawyer in me basically wants to fight and to win. So unfortunately, I have lost a number of friends that way. It's harder with my mom. So I usually say, okay, you win. She doesn't like that at all. So she always wants to have the last word. So I just, you know, to end a conversation, I say, okay, you win. You're right. I'm wrong. I'm really wrong. And that doesn't work well. And I should stop that. It's a passive aggressive way of doing things. So I'll say, okay. So I'm just going to cut that out.
Hi.
Hi guys, holy cow, there's that Karen's there, and wow, look at
He
you
wanted
guys.
to know what mastermind I was on.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, we've just been covering part 3 of how to win friends and influence people. Well, actually, we've only got into 2 principles of it out of 12, so we've got a way to go, but we're making good progress here.
No, that's a great book. It's a great
yes.
book, and really leads to a lot of great success, right? Because a lot of our success is how we interact with other people.
Mm.
You've echoed it perfectly. That's exactly what Dale Carnegie said.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
I would expect nothing less from you, Walter.
What it brings home to me too is so much of your interaction will be based upon how much you love yourself, actually, and respect yourself. And if you can treat others as you treat yourself, then there won't be arguments.
yeah, I think you got a really good point. I think the one thing that I've found in dealing with people is also learning how not to take things personal.
Mm.
Because life isn't as personal as we think it is, but we are responsible for more than we think we are.
Mm.
How we choose to show up affects our experience of whatever's happening, but also other people's experience of us. And I think that a lot of the Dale Carnegie principles there really give rise to self-awareness.
Mm.
Right?
And what is being right, because there's many rights, you know.
Well, I think that's one of the things too, is understanding that standing in our power is really about being present where life is happening, and understanding that our truth is not the truth, it's what we believe to be true, but having an open mindset to know that something that someone else says may not be necessarily the truth, but it may add a little bit into our little cauldron of truth, and allow it to kind of influence it as well too, right?
Allow us to see it through a different filter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like putting on the specs when you go to a 3D movie.
Yeah, it's interesting. In that masterclass today, I actually spoke about the filters and how they affect our decisions that we make. It was really an interesting chat. And
I haven't been to one of yours yet, Walter.
yeah, I started doing some work in the vaults and master classes where masterminds are great. I used to do the Growth Seekers Mastermind for a long time. But I found that it was really always hard because I as you know, Tony, having a mastermind, you're really trying to get insight from everybody else. So in my master class, I could ramble on for 45 minutes or 50 minutes, and people expect that, right? And but in masterminds, we really try to be more collaborative and let everybody share and connect to that collective consciousness, right? So yeah, and I've been running that for a while. I'm doing all the recordings, so eventually I'll have those as well there too. So
Good.
I look forward to being on more of your sessions, Walter. I just found that some of them, for me, there was the time zone difference. It was
Yeah,
the middle of
me
the night
too. And
where I was struggling a little bit.
if
But
it's
I
bad for you, Tony, it's 10
really
times
did
worse
enjoy
for
your
me.
sessions. And I'd just like to observe something here, Walter. It's very important that's just come up, is that Julie told us all earlier in the conversation that she was really bad at remembering names, and yet she remembered your name straight away.
That's true.
Did anyone else notice that?
No, I knew it was Walter.
well,
His
you know what's
fame,
interesting?
his fame went before him.
You know, what's interesting too is that what I've found when you're present in the moment, you're more likely to remember somebody's names. If you really look at sometimes when you forget people's names, because as you're shaking hands with them, you're already thinking about other things. So even though you're shaking with them, that's why that whole idea of looking somebody right in the eye or engaging with somebody or even having a little bit of laughter where you're in the moment, you're more likely to remember it. So because I sometimes can be very not present, and I have a hard time remembering names, but whenever I'm present with people, I can remember their names. So it's a lot of really choosing to be in the moment on purpose, right?
Agree.
Thank
Awesome,
you,
guys.
Can I
Take care.
request that next time you come and join us right from the beginning, because I'd love to get your insights into this as well. Once Walter gets on the call, I could very easily sit there and listen all day, but I have to. I'm aware that I'm supposed to be leading this meeting and that it is at time, and I don't want to take.
And you do it
Christopher
very
had a
well,
question.
Tony.
Chris has his hand up though.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris, please, yeah.
One thing I wanted to share, which has really helped me, is when I had heart-to-heart conversations with my mom. I've actually brought up things in the past, and I said, you know, I just want to say that you were right in that area and all that. And she was really, her heart was really warmed when I actually brought things up, which she said in the past. And I've just wanted to affirm that she was right all along and there. So that really helped develop that relationship.
Yeah,
further.
healing.
Yeah. Rather than just keep quiet and that's helped me.
Of course, it's part of the developmental of children is that, you know, while they're teenagers and young people, they know everything. So you can ask them anything at that stage because they know it all. And then they go back to not knowing it all, you know, when they get past a certain point. So, yeah, it's time for challenging. Young people do challenge at that stage. It's part of their rites of passage, I think.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for a great conversation. I'm going to take on board
Tony.
And agree with what Chris said. I'm going to resist the temptation to get into arguments, particularly with my stepson who has high functioning autism, because he loves to tell you that you're wrong and loves to tell you, you know, everything about why he thinks he's right. And I have done that trick in the past where I've gone, okay, you win, you know, you're right. Even then that is passive aggressive, because it's like saying, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to make it obvious by saying that you win. But you don't need to do that even, do you? You can just.
It's patronizing, condescending.
Let it go. Let it go. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have
a great day or night, everybody.
And keep reading that book.
Bye.
We'll carry on with the rest of chapter or more sections of part 3 next time.
Perfect.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.